In this region, the government says a vote on whether or not to repeal the ban will be held when the time can be found. Well, let's see what our guest this week made of it all. Heidi Allen is the new MP for South Cambridgeshire. Lewis Herbert is the leader of Cambridge City Council. Welcome to you both. Heidi Allen, which of those bills excited you the most?
For me, it was the areas around taxation. So lifting everybody on minimum wage out of it altogether, lifting the first threshold to 12,500 and then the higher rate of tax to 50,000. That really gives people, for me...
What about in the region, though?
Well, I think that is important for us here because we have such high employment rates, and given the cost of housing, which is something I know we're going to have to work on very hard together, giving people the ability to hold more of their income has to help them with that, because house prices, as people know, are just escalating out of all control. So anything that helps people keep more money in their pockets has got to help us here locally.
Lewis Herbert, how about you?
Well, it's 5 years it's another 5 years of a Conservative government, and that's a long stretch. So I think
it's the first 5 years of a Conservative government, isn't it?
Well,
a long stretch does sound a little bit like going to prison. It's
a long period of time, but I think the concern is that there's on issues like housing, there's a look at the needs of homeowners, but there isn't much for the people who need to rent. And in a city like Cambridge, we've got a lot of people on low incomes, and we've also got a large private rented sector. So we've also got a lot of properties being bought up overseas before they even get onto the market. So
it's very difficult to work against, though, isn't it?
Well, I think what we want to see is just a recognition that there needs to be more building of homes for rent.
Will the devolution bill help you have a louder voice in that?
I hope so. I think, but the balance there, Stuart, is the balance between the cuts that might come in the budget statement in July against the opportunities that we've got, because Cambridge is a high growth area. We need money for transport and housing to be able to make it better whilst still protecting our precious quality of life. So devolution has opportunities, and I think we've got one foot in the door, assisted by the partnership that we do have with South Cambridgeshire as a Conservative council, City Labour council, new MPs enthusiastic and showing great determination.
Heidi Allen, there was a lot about the Northern Powerhouse. I know we've talked about this before, but there was nothing about this region, really.
Well, I suppose we did quite well in the autumn statement, actually. Some of the things you've touched on already around the city deal, and we're now any business rate growth. We're one of the first local authorities or councils to be able to hold on to that for ourselves. So perhaps we had all the good news in the autumn, and we're setting some of the infrastructure in place for, national development, and that's right, because I think we would agree, I'm sure, that one of the great opportunities that comes with the economic success of the area that we're in is the ability to spread that, and having the money to do that.
Just before we move on, I'd like to ask you very quickly both about hunting. Lewis Herbert?
Fairly simple answer, against changing the law. I'd like to protect badgers too.
OK. Heidi Allen?
I agree totally. I would not support repealing the Act at all.
What if the whips have a word in your ear and say?
I've already told them they can stand on my head and I won't change my mind.
OK.
Services for our residents.
Can you just hang on there a second? Let's bring Lewis Herbert in. Are you able to make savings?
We are, and we will continue to do that, and we work closely with the neighbours in South Cambridgeshire, but I think we're getting closer to crunch point. I know the county councils are really close to crunch point.
He says it's a challenge, not a problem.
I think you should talk more to the county councils. I think the growing elderly population, I think the transfer of costs from the welfare reform onto local authority budgets, there's big challenges. We want to protect those people who need our help the most.
Heidi Allen, you must have, first of all, your people in your area. He's saying that those people who are vulnerable are at risk.
Well, only if we don't do a good job and we don't rise to the challenge. It was interesting hearing your question about Cambridgeshire and City together. Well, that's what we are, South Cambs and City together. We can find cost savings. This, for me, is a cultural transformation. I've worked for a lot of large organisations and small businesses going through change and having to reinvent themselves for a brave new world. And that's what's happening to our local authorities. But if we can get slicker, more efficient, just think how fabulous the services will be that we can provide. We've just got to rise to the challenge and work in partnership. And, for me, lose our political, perhaps, baggage at the door.
How difficult is it for you? Because you've got a Labour authority in Cambridge and you're working with a Conservative authority. How easy is that, or how difficult is that?
We share objectives. We both want to build more houses for rent. We want to be able to borrow against the housing stock we've got. It has challenges. There's things that we don't agree on, but there's an awful lot that we can do together. I think the problem is that local government finance is a very clumsy Whitehall-led system, loads of red tape, and I'm not sure that they distribute the money particularly well.
So is this the end of the system as we know it, do you think?
Well, we'll end up with we'll wait to see what happens in the budget statement in July, but we're fearing that we're going to end up in 5 years' time with no core government grant, and at that point I think we as a city can just about stretch and cope, albeit that we will have to cut some services.
You in particular will end up with no core government grant, or everybody?
We're fearing that all of the districts will end up with little or no government grant. I don't want it to happen, but that's what we fear.
I think you're right, I have to say. South Cambs are actively preparing for that.
All right, no, let's just ask.
We're not a poor
just
city.
Ask Brandon Lewis first of all. Are they right? Some interesting things in there. Are you concerned that politicians, we saw the Douglas Carswell thing, won't feel safe enough to walk on the streets soon?
I think a conscious decision I made, certainly when I decided to get involved in politics, is that you are going to be out there. You just have to look after yourself. I think be careful. Because
it's important, actually, isn't it, that people recognise you and talk to you, otherwise you don't know what's going on in their minds.
Well, people should be free to express their opinions, and whilst some people may disagree, they've got to respect them.
Yeah, and that's the important thing, isn't it? That once you get a mob, it can get out of hand, and people may not be representing your point of view when the mob is at hand.
Well, we now have opinions that challenge others, and obviously issues about race or immigration do create strong feelings, and yeah, we just cannot have people silenced. It's just some care in the debate.
Good. Both of you, thank you very much for being with us today. That's it from all of us. We're back at the same time next